Welcome to another very special hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Emerald. You can check out my full rule set in the description below, but in short, no items in battle except for held items, no overleveling, and we're playing on set mode. So nothing out of the ordinary here. But there is of course a twist. Every single one of my encounters will be the worst possible Pokémon that I could obtain for every single route. This doesn't necessarily mean all of my encounters will be bad, but I have a feeling I'll be stuck with some real stinkers. Now you might be thinking, okay, with roughly 27 water routes in Hoenn, you're still guaranteed to receive basically every single water Pokemon in the entire game. Wrong. All water encounters are banned from this run, including rivers and ponds within towns. Additionally, I am also banning any encounters that I could receive in towns and cities. Just in case you were wondering, that's roughly 25 encounters that I just removed from my pool of options. Will I make it through this run? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. I'm gonna cut right past the usual box truck comments and get straight into starter selection. This was a tough decision for me because Treecko and Torchic are honestly very close, and I even considered banning my starter altogether. But ultimately, I decided not to, and I went with Treecko. Treecko is great for Roxanne, and Sceptile is a very good late game Pokemon. But then there's this one. Grovyle is hot garbage against most of the bosses in between Gyms 1 and 7, and for that reason, I'm giving Treecko the crown for the worst starter in Gen 3. And since the location I met him on is Route 101, I cannot receive another encounter from here either. I quickly move through the rest of the intro by easily taking out May and obtaining our first Pokeballs. Now let's pick up our first few encounters. On Route 103, I pick up a Zigzagoon. Definitely the worst encounter on this route, but not a bad Pokemon by any means, honestly. Linoone is pretty fast, and the early stab Headbutt is very helpful. I have a feeling that this will be a trend for most of the early encounters, honestly, because most of the Pokemon that you can obtain on these early routes are not that bad. On Route 102, I pick up a Wurmple, and again, not a bad pickup. No matter what it evolves into, it's going to be great for Brawly, and it ends up being a Silcoon. Beautifly is definitely not as great as Dustox for sure, but I'm gonna rectify that in just a minute. First, to plow through Wally's How to Catch a Pokemon tutorial, our first interruption from our boy Scott, and now our encounter for Route 104, Poochyena. Another solid encounter that just happens to be arguably the worst one for this route. You get Mightyena very early, and it comes with Intimidate of course, which I'm sure we'll find a good use for. Now, in Petalburg Woods, I decided that my encounter here would be Cascoon. Yes, I do normally play with Dupe's Claws in my rule set, which means this wouldn't technically be a legal encounter, as I already obtained a Wurmple earlier. But I made the exception here because if I didn't, I would have been granted either a Shroomish, Taillow, or Slackoth. While you can argue that Slackoth is the worst out of those three, he's still a fantastic encounter and would have definitely been far more useful than a Dustox in the long run. I arrived in Rustboro and the team is looking solid. I feel like I won't be feeling the effects of the challenge until a bit later when the encounters I have start to really matter more and more. Off to Route 116 to do some grinding for Roxanne and to pick up our next encounter, which admittedly took a bit of time to get because it's Skitty, a 2% encounter. It should honestly be a crime that a Pokemon this bad has such a ridiculously low catch rate. Oh well, welcome to the team, little buddy. I've actually never used a Delcatty before, so who knows, maybe actually using one will change my perception of it. And of course, what would this challenge be without our token strategic sacrifice? I guess Whismur isn't the worst Pokemon ever, but it just evolves so goddamn late that it's just not usually worth using. It would be interesting if I was forced to use it though at some point, I guess. After a bit of grinding later, I have finally reached Roxanne, and here is our squad so far. Looking awesome at the moment. Nothing really much to go over. I'm expecting Treecko to sweep here, as Roxanne's AI tends to get a little confused with Nosepass and Rock Tomb, but let's see how it goes. The first two Geodudes go down with a couple of Absorbs as expected, and her ace Nosepass quickly comes into the fight. The fight went over just as I anticipated, although I did sneak a few lucky crits in there, just for extra measure. A bunch of Absorbs later, and Roxanne falls, giving us our first badge. Not bad, but it's only going to get harder from here. Let's see what we got in store for Brawly in the rest of the game. But first, we need to go assist some helpless adults by retrieving the Devon goods and saving Pico. Alright, I'm sorry, I don't care how many times I've said it, I will continue to bring this up in every single goddamn playthrough of Emerald. Why the fuck is Mr. Stone asking me to deliver a letter to his son when his company literally invented the fucking cell phone? Just pick up the phone and call him. I promise he has one. He will give me his number when I meet him, ironically at the same time that I deliver your stupid letter. Anyway, on to Doofer Town. Right away, I run into the house by the dock to pick up the silk scarf, which will boost my Zigzagoon's headbutt even further. And now it's off to Granite Cave for a bit of grinding for Brawly already. No new encounter just yet, because unfortunately I won't be able to obtain him until I beat the 3rd badge. Should be interesting though once this one's on the team. While I grind in here, I'm going to deliver this dumb letter to Steven and take a quick detour back to Rustboro so I can pick up the experience share, which will make this grind a lot easier. And after a ton of grinding later, here is the team I've got for Brawly. This one shouldn't be too much of a challenge either, with both Dustox and Beautifly on the team. Between the two of them, they should make quick work of Brawly and his fighting types. Let's get into it. I lead with Dustox to see how far I can go before I have to switch into Beautifly. Machop puts up a good fight and Brawly uses a few potions to keep him going, but eventually my onslaught of confusions eventually brings him down. Meditite is up next, and Gust will be the move to use here as it will deal more damage, even with the Reflect that he just put up. Meditite doesn't have any offensive moves besides Focus Punch, so as long as I don't miss, which I can't, then he's essentially a free fight. His ace Makuhito comes out last, and I get very lucky with some crits here. And despite the Citrus Berry, Makuhito goes down very easily, and I didn't even have to use Beautifly. 2 gyms down, 6 to go. We also pick up the TM for Bulk Up, which could definitely come in handy at some point in the run. Back on Mr. Briney's boat and off to Slateport. I always make sure I pick up all the various items around this area as they are very useful. Soft Sand, Hard Scales, Soda Pop of course, and the TM for Torment. There's just so much to pick up around this town. I can't forget to grab the TM for Thief from the Aqua Grunt in the museum as well. Off to Route 110 to get our next encounter, Minin. And honestly, okay then. Forget what I just said. We are fucking catching this thing and using it. Oh my god. This is another one of those routes that doesn't really have a bad quote-unquote Pokemon, and my decision to go with either Minin or Plusle over Gulpin was really close anyway. Minin and Plusle have a ton of amazing utility options, and Swalot is pretty good too. The comparisons are close enough that I am using this thing. I don't care. It's not every day that you get a chance to use a legitimate shiny encounter in a Nuzlocke. With our shiny new Gulpin, it's time to do a bit of grinding again and head into the notorious Rival 3 fight. Let's see how this goes. But looking at my entire team, that Combuskin is quite scary. I think we can manage though. Let's do this. I lead with Beautifly to take out the Wingull. I know it'll be close and I do have to avoid a crit, but putting Beautifly in harm's way versus the rest of my team, I just felt like was the way to go here. Wingull does go down, and here comes the biggest problem in Combuskin. I decided to switch into Mightyena first to get in an attack drop. I was hoping to also get in at least one sand attack as well, but Ember did way more damage than I expected, and I got burned on top of it. I send in Whisburn next as a strategic sacrifice so I can cleanly switch in Dustox, who will deal really good damage with Confusion. Originally, the plan was to get a couple of Confusions off and then switch into Linoon to finish Combuskin off with a headbutt. But, as it turns out, Dustox is not only faster, but he was able to survive Combuskin's range on Ember with 1 HP left. And with one more Confusion, Combuskin goes down. Lombre is easy cleanup for Linoon, and Rival 3 is done with only 1 loss. Looking at my current team, as well as what I have in the box currently, plus the fact I won't be getting any water route encounters, yeah, fire and fighting types are going to be an issue. But I need to worry about that later, as now I've got Wattson to think about. I'll have to get more creative with my strategy here since I went with Trico as my starter, and we don't have any of the good fighting or ground types to lean on. After clearing out all of the trainers and item gathering around Mauville City, Verdant Turf, Route 117, and Route 118, we absolutely crush Wally into the dirt. Before we head into the gym though, we do have one more encounter that we can pick up on Route 117 in Illumise. This is probably my first bad encounter, I would say, as Illumise, while not worthless, is going to be tough to utilize well. It does get some utility which may come in handy at some point. Alright, a bit more grinding and a lot of prep later, and I think I'm ready for Wattson. Like I mentioned earlier, I have to get a bit more creative with this one. I'll need to take some big risks as well in order to make it out of there with a win. Since this boss fight is a bit more complicated, let me take a step back and review the team in more detail for this one. Grovile's going to start things off by removing Wattson's Voltorb with Bullet Seed and hopefully won't take a self-destruct. Grovile is a good Pokemon for this because he's not going to perform super well on either Magneton or Manectric, theoretically, so having him deal with the minor nuisances is pretty good. He does have Rock Smash though in case I do need him for Magneton. Mr. Shiny is up next, and oh man, just look at this little guy. Gulpin will be used to put Wattson's Electrike to sleep. More on that in just a second. If my primary strategy doesn't work out, then Yawn could be very useful against Magneton as well if I get lucky and don't die. Linoon is next, and he's got quite the interesting moveset if you couldn't tell. He's perfectly set up to go toe-to-toe with Wattson's ace Manectric. Mud Sport will actually be kind of helpful for once. It literally may be the first time I've ever used it. I also used my TM for Thief on Linoon as well to try to nab that Citrus Berry. And now, it's time for the star of the show, Mightyena. I'm using Gulpin to put that Electric to sleep so I can fairly cleanly switch in Mightyena to use Attract. From there, I'm going to set up enough Howls in order to Rock Smash both Electrike and hopefully his Magneton into Oblivion. Dustox is here to cheerlead and as my second sacrifice if I need it. And speaking of sacrifices, it's time to say goodbye to Beautifly. He'll be used to help cleanly switch Linoon into Manectric, giving Linoon the best chance possible. Everything's in place. Let's do this. Starting off the fight, Bullet Seed is doing a bit less damage than I would have expected. I used Rock Smash in the middle there because Voltorb does like to go for self-destruct whenever he falls below 38% of his HP or so, at least in my experience. Grovile got the job done though, and now Electrike comes out. This was the first greedy play I made in this fight where I actually switched up my strategy from yawning Electrike with Gulpin to trying to get off a Stun Spore with Beautifly, which was super risky, but the risk paid off immensely. And the paralysis will help us hugely. Mightyena comes in now to force Electrike into a long-term relationship that he didn't ask for, and now we howl a lot. According to my calculations, I would need to be at least +5 attack in order to two-shot Wattson's Magneton, and that's exactly where I get to. I only took one single shockwave, and I wasn't paralyzed either, which was absolutely perfect. I take out Electrike, and now Magneton comes out. With only 2 Rock Smashes, Magneton goes down as quickly as he came out, and I am in fantastic shape right now with the amount of luck I've had so far. Wattson's Ace Manectric finally comes out, and this is where a series of mistakes starts to float to the surface. I kept Mightyena in and used Rock Smash to get in as much damage as I could, but I didn't take the crit into account and I paid for it. That really sucks, as Mightyena was probably one of the best Pokemon on my team at this point in the run. But at least I get a clean switch into Linoon, who I brought to take out Manectric in the first place. But another mistake was made. My thinking here was that Wattson would use Thunder Wave right off the bat because my Linoon hadn't been paralyzed yet. So I gave him a Cherry Berry before the fight to try to mitigate this and get some extra value. Unfortunately, this Manectric doesn't give a single fuck and starts hurling shockwaves at me instead before I can get Mud Sport up to reduce the damage. This is very, very bad because I was also relying on the move Thief to steal Manectric's Citrus Berry, which I can't do now because Linoon is still holding the Cherry Berry. After some back and forth, I need to switch into something else to save my Linoon, and I think I can still make it through this. Beautifly, it was nice knowing you, buddy, but you gotta go. With another clean switch, I'm able to bring in Gulpin to get off a Yawn. I know Manectric will go for another Shockwave, so I switch into Grovile, who I really need to bring this one home. After several very lucky Bullet Seeds with high rolls and a crit as well, I escaped this fight on the brink of death. Oh my god, that was rough. The third badge is now ours, along with the TM for Shockwave. A huge step forward for sure, as the map really starts to open up at this point. Losing Mightyena sucks, but at least I'm going to pick up a bunch of new encounters to play around with for the upcoming challenges. With the third badge in hand, I've got a couple of detours to take before heading north. First, quickly pick up the HM for strength, and then head all the way back to Granite Cave outside of Dewford Town to pick up that encounter I had to skip earlier. And after smashing every goddamn rock in this place multiple times, I finally run into Nosepass, a Pokemon that I have literally never caught myself, let alone actually use him in battle. And there's a good reason for that. Nosepass, while yes, being kind of an ugly Pokemon, just doesn't do all that much either. He's super super bulky, but doesn't do anything to utilize that bulk very well. I have a feeling though that we'll need him for Flannery, based on what we currently are working with. Now, finally heading north of Mauville towards Falliber Town, I slash through a ton of trainers and pick up a bunch of new encounters as I progress through the routes and the story. Starting with Route 112, my next encounter is a Numel, who is considerably worse than the Marill I could have caught instead. Azumarill is bulky, gets great coverage, and has great matchups throughout the game. Camerupt, while having more stats in general, does not have any of those other things. He will be very helpful though, up to and including the 6th gym. It's just afterwards, not as much, but we can still make something work. Next up is Fiery Path, where our shiny boy evolves into Swalot, and I can pick up one of the worst encounters in the entire game in Slugma. Macargo is kind of like Camerupt in that it has decent stats, but an abysmal typing and not a whole lot of coverage either. 2 4x weaknesses to common types is just horrific. But what really adds insult to injury here is that you're stuck with this thing until at least level 38, which is crazy to me. Why couldn't this thing at least evolve at like level 25 or something? Now on Route 113, and under this constantly falling ash, I of course pick up our token Spinda. The pattern is meh, but that's okay. Spinda has some really bad stats, and they are distributed very poorly, essentially making Spinda bad at everything. It's got some interesting tools like Teeter Dance and some coverage options as well, but Hello, Falliber Town. Goodbye, Falliber Town. After picking up the TM for Dig, which will be very helpful against Flannery, I head down to Route 114 to pick up another encounter. Luckily, this is another route where all the Pokemon are pretty decent for the most part, but the worst in my opinion has to be Seviper. Seviper is not bad honestly. Mixed attack stats with some coverage including Giga Drain and Flamethrower if I wanted them. Poison is also just a decent defensive typing as well for the region. I'm okay with this. On to Meteor Falls for yet another encounter in Solrock. This was actually a very pleasant surprise for me because I could have sworn Lunatone was also in this game. Solrock, while not great, is so much better than Lunatone and will be extremely important for Flannery and Winona, especially with that rock typing and coverage. After dealing with these absolute lunatics, I'm also able to pick up a Moonstone, which I can use to evolve my Skitty now if I needed to. At least it won't be completely useless, I guess, right? Right? Now it's time for another grind in preparation for Maxie and Team Magma, as well as the 4th gym. I always found Fiery Path to be the best spot as far as experience per hour, outside of the daycare method of course. But I could really use the EVs right now, so I think I'll stick with this for now. See you in a bit. Now that the grind is mostly taken care of, it's time to scale Mount Chimney and face off against Maxie. This is what I'm rolling with at the moment. It's really weird seeing a Solrock and a Nosepass at my party, but I'm actually really excited to use them. Time for the next boss fight, Maxie. I lead with Swalot to take out Mightyena one-on-one. Between Sludge and Body Slam, I'm in great shape, despite the attack drop from Intimidate. I want his camera up to come out next and attempt a Magnitude. This scenario would set myself up perfectly to cleanly switch into Solrock if I can pull it off. It doesn't go exactly that way, but luckily Ember doesn't exactly deal a whole lot of damage either. After a series of rock throws and some fire spins, just for some extra damage over time, Camerupt does finally go down. With his last Pokemon being Zubat, I wasn't really too worried about it, even with Bite being super effective. Solrock didn't have any issues bringing down Maxie's final Pokemon, and that was pretty easy for the most part. But the real challenge lies just to the south, so let's get to it. Always gotta make sure you stock up on these lava cookies while I'm up here. Full heals for 1/3 of the price. Yep, I'll take those. Now onto the Jagged Pass, I can get another encounter here in Spoink. Not the worst, but not great either. Psychic types in general are at a pretty big disadvantage in these games, honestly. And Grumpig is just a significantly worse Alakazam or Gardevoir, basically. Still usable for sure, though, if I need him. This fight shouldn't be as complicated as Wattson, so I'll make this quick. Grovyle is actually leading the charge on this one, ironically. Leaf Blade should bring her Numel down in one hit. Swalot is here to deal with her Camerupt primarily. The first Overheat will deal a lot, but after an Amnesia and the special attack drop on the Fire Camel, those overheats will not be hurting so much anymore. Next up is Numel, who will be tasked with backing up Swalot if needed. Otherwise, I'll use him to take out Slugma. Linoon is here as the backup and will provide any extra support that my team members need against any of their respective assignments. And finally, our stars of the show. Both Nosepass and Solrock will work together to take down Flannery's scariest threat, her Torkoal. Nosepass will provide the Thunder Wave and some initial damage, and hopefully Solrock can then come in and finish the job. Alright, Flannery's up next. Let's see what she's got. I open up with Grovyle to take out Numel with a single Leaf Blade. Well, at least that's what I thought was going to happen. This could have gone very badly for me if Numel decided to use Overheat or even Sunny Day, but instead it used Magnitude, which is arguably the worst move it could have possibly used. Not only that, but we got Flannery to blow a Hyper Potion on it too, which is absolutely insane. I don't know how that happened, but I'm not complaining, I guess. Camerupt comes out next, and I actually decide to throw Numel into the mix first, because he's much more suited to take the Overheat with his 4x resistance to fire. With Camerupt's special attack greatly weakened, I go for a Magnitude, and it hits so much harder than I thought it would. Wow. I did give Numel a Soft Sand before this fight, and it looked like it paid off hugely because he was able to take Camerupt down by himself. Slugma comes out next, and because I know I'm faster, I actually get greedy and go for another Magnitude to take it out without any issues. Numel's pretty strong in this fight, honestly. I'm surprised. With Torkoal now out, Nosepass is up to try to take some of these overheats for everybody else. But because Numel's HP was so low, the move Flannery chose was going to be at random, and so I ended up switching in Nosepass on a Body Slam instead of an Overheat. That's amazing. This exchange between Nosepass and Torkoal went on forever. I got so lucky for a number of reasons. One, Torkoal continued to favor Body Slam over Overheat for some reason, even in the sun, which I found very strange that the AI would go for that. Anyone else have an explanation for this? And two, I got so many flinches from Rock Slide. It was ridiculous. So ridiculous that I didn't even have to send out Soul Rock to do anything. Nosepass brought Torkoal down by himself. And you know what? I've got a lot more respect for him now. I was able to escape Flannery without a single death, and that makes me very fortunate. I celebrate this victory for now, but my next challenge is coming up super quick. I'm coming for you, Dad. After leaving the gym, our rival gives us the desert goggles, which means it's time to pillage the desert of all of its items and grab my next encounter in Cacnea. Cacturn's stat distribution is pretty bad. He can hit pretty hard, but his defenses are horrible, and so is that speed stat. Its signature ability in Needle Arm is actually kinda awesome, but the problem with it is you have to be faster than your opponent in order to get the effect, which won't be very often. We'll find a way to make them work though. I've never used one, so it should be interesting. After clearing out the desert and some grinding later, this is the new team that we will be using for Norman. Grovyle will be used to take out Spinda and whoever happens to pop in next, whether that's Vigoroth or Linoon. I'm kinda hoping it's Linoon because his belly drum gives me anxiety and I just want it to be over with quickly. Soul Rock will be used on either Linoon or Vigoroth depending on how things go. His typing and bulkiness should help us against either one. Swalot is here to absorb a hit or two from slacking while he throws up a Toxic to help bring him down. And Dustox is back to finish Norman's ace off for good with Protect. Seviper and Nosepass are just backups here. Seviper has great damage and Nosepass just has great typing and bulk for this fight. I'm definitely feeling more and more pressure as the game goes on now, as our encounters and our options overall just continue to feel worse and worse. Let's see how this goes. I start off the fight strong with Grovyle, who takes Spinda down in 2 hits, and it levels up, giving me an extra +7 to his special attack. Wow, that EV training really pulled off. The exact same thing happens against Vigoroth, although it was a little scary as I was vulnerable to die from a crit there, but luckily it worked out. Linoon comes out next, and I'm actually glad that Grovyle is at a lower HP, because there's no way Linoon will want to go for a belly drum when it knows it has an easy kill. This allows me to switch into Soul Rock pretty cleanly, as Slash wasn't going to do all that much. Linoon doesn't decide to go for belly drum surprisingly, and after a little bit of back and forth, he goes down without any major issues. All that's left is Norman's ace slacking, and honestly, this is going to be the easiest one to take out on his entire team. With Swalot switched in, I set up a Toxic, take an additional turn so I could take another hit on Slacking's active turn, and then I switch into Dustox on his off turn, and now I just use Protect to bring us all the way home. I did forget to equip the Lepa Berry, so I did have to switch Dustox back out for a single turn, but that wasn't a big deal. Nosepass was perfectly capable of taking anything that Slacking could have thrown at him for more than a few turns anyway. And just like that, without much drama at all, Norman goes down, and the 5th gym badge is ours. And not to mention the HM for Surf as well, which will be very helpful. Now that the fight is over, I put Dustox back into the box and take Numel back out. I'll need him for Winona. It is at this point that a metric fuck ton of new routes open up, and while I'm not allowed to pick up any of the water encounters, there are still a lot of land routes that open up with new Pokemon to catch. This section of the game is kind of nice because I don't have to commit to Winona the second I enter Fortree City. I can just walk on through and explore the several new areas that open up past it, including Lily Cove City, which is good because I'll need as much help as I can get. After I quickly pick up the amulet coin back in Littleroot and the random items across the pond in Petalburg City, I trek back to the north of Rustboro to explore Route 115. Some of the trainers on this route are a little scary, so I do tread with caution, but it's worth it as I pick up the TM for Focus Punch and another amazing encounter in Jigglypuff. Wigglytuff is actually not a bad Pokemon, but it's certainly worse than Swellow and Pelipper for sure. While its HP stat is massive, its defenses are pretty low, and its speed is quite bad as well. But it does have a respectable special attack stat and gets amazing coverage options. Its moveset will be Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Psychic, and Flamethrower. Jigglypuff can also evolve immediately, as there aren't any moves that he needs to learn first before I evolve him. Will definitely be an amazing addition to the team. The next stop on my tour of the Hoenn region will be the water routes to the south, where I can pick up the TM for Sludge Bomb and explore the abandoned ship to pick up the extremely important TM in Ice Beam. And after clearing through the rest of these routes, I make it all the way back to Mauville City, where I can pick up Wattson's little side quest to investigate New Mauville. Here I can pick up my next encounter in Voltorb, who is much more respectable than people may think, and yes, I was very lucky it didn't die. The difference between Electrode and Magneton is practically night and day, but fast electric types in general are super useful in these games, especially against the upcoming Winona fight. After I finish up in New Mauville, I return back to Wattson to pick up the TM for Thunderbolt, another huge upgrade for the team. I was starting to feel worried about the rest of the run earlier, but pickups like these do make me feel a lot better about my chances. After stopping to EV train for a little bit, I'm ready to head over to the eastern side of Hoenn, where the next several encounters await us. On Route 118, the worst encounter is most definitely Kecleon at a 1% chance to find. Seriously though, why are all the rarest encounters the worst? I don't have a lot of experience with Kecleon, but it just doesn't seem very useful. Color change is a very interesting but not always very helpful ability. Maybe it's better against the AI of the game, because otherwise the ability honestly hurts Kecleon more than it helps it. Up next is Route 119's encounter, which I've decided is Tropius. Yes, I know I can obtain Castform at the Weather Institute, but looking at what each are capable of, Castform is actually much better than Tropius because of its coverage. Tropius just doesn't do anything well. It's got an absolutely terrible typing defensively, and it doesn't deal a whole lot of damage either. Might be helpful against Juan later on if I need him, but for now, it's not going to help me with much of anything. After clearing out said institute, having said Castform unapologetically forced into my care, and releasing that Castform immediately into the wild after they just gave it to me, I deal with Rival 4 before reaching Fortree City. This fight isn't anything special, honestly. Your rival takes a really huge step down from when you fought them last, which is great for completing the challenge, but kinda sucks at the same time. I really wish they had made them a bit more difficult in the later stages of the game. Hello, Fortree City. Goodbye, Fortree City. On Route 120, I pick up my next encounter in Marill, which is one of the worst encounters that I haven't gotten yet on this route. Azumarill is a solid Pokemon, although much more useful earlier on in the game, especially when dealing with Flannery. What makes this encounter great for me though is that it's one of the few water types that can be found on land, which means it's one of the only water encounters, if not literally the only water type, that I will receive in this run. Very cool. While I'm here, I grab the Devon Scope so I can now access the gym, and I pick up the TM for Sunny Day as well from the Scorched Slab below. Now, I mentioned earlier that I can check out a whole bunch of routes past Fortree before I even enter Winona's gym, but there's a problem. My entire party, plus a few others of the PC, are already at the level cap, so it looks like I'll be taking on Winona now. All that EV training kinda pushed it too far. Not a big deal though, honestly. I feel like I can take her with the new encounters I picked up on the way here. With that being said, let's get into another quick team review. Electrode will lead things off because once Winona's first Pokemon goes down, I'm expecting Altaria to be switched in next. Wigglytuff would then come out quickly to deal with the notorious Ace. Between Electrode and Wigglytuff, I'm expecting them to take on most, if not all, of this fight. Everyone else on the team is essentially a backup. Camerupt is fantastic against Tropius, and especially Skarmory. Seviper and Swalot are there if something goes catastrophically wrong here, and the same goes for Nosepass as well. Nosepass is here because unfortunately for me, I accidentally overleveled my Solrock walk past the level cap while I was trying to dodge trainers on Route 119 to get back to Mauville so I could buy another Thunderbolt TM for Electrode. Oh well. I don't think I'll need him, but he would have been a better backup for sure. Everything's in place, and I'm actually feeling pretty confident. Let's do this. I lead with Electrode, and he swiftly disposes of Swablu. With Altaria out now, I switch into Wigglytuff. This Altaria loves to go for Dragon Dance first, regardless of what Pokemon is out, so I knew this would be a clean switch. I also knew that a single Ice Beam would take him out, and it did. I mean, that's basically the fight right there, because her other Pokemon can't do anything against this pink monster. Tropius comes out, and I had a brain fart when I went for Flamethrower instead of Ice Beam, and it doesn't kill. My Citrus Berry pops, and so it's not really a big deal, so I go for Ice Beam on the next turn, and Tropius goes down. Pelipper comes out next, and that's just an easy Thunderbolt waiting to happen. Protect is just delaying the inevitable, buddy. Skarmory comes out last, and I hit it with a Flamethrower for good damage, but Steel Wing brings me down low enough that I just don't want to risk anything. I might as well switch over to Camerupt, who's more than capable of taking out Skarmory on his own. And if something went horribly wrong, my Camerupt is far more expendable than my Wigglytuff at this point. A couple embers later, and Skarmory goes down, giving us the 6th gym badge and the TM for Aerial Ace. You love to see it. With Winona out of the way, I begin the long trek towards Moss Deep City. I won't bore you with too many of the details here, as there is a lot to get through between now and then, but most of it is just story-related stuff, battling a shit ton of trainers, and picking up a ton of items along the way. But we will of course go over the new encounters, and speaking of which, now on Route 121 I can pick up a Shuppet. Banette is just average at best. It is a ghost type, and ghost types are always at least a little bit useful due to their immunities to fighting in normal. Banette does have the benefit of being a physical attacker in this generation, where the ghost type is actually physical, so it does get the most out of Shadow Ball at least. Not sure if we'll use him yet though, but meh, could be a useful backup. I stop by Lily Cove to heal up, take on Rival 5 real quick, and grab the Pokeblock case so I can head back to the Safari Zone for my next encounter. It was a tough call as to what the worst Pokemon I could have caught in here was, but I decided to go with Girafarig, although it was very close between him and Natu. Girafarig is just very average, middle of the road kind of Pokemon, doesn't have a special niche, just has okay-ish stats, okay-ish move pool, okay-ish ability, you get the point. Definitely not terrible though. Stopping by Route 123 before I enter Mount Pyre, I pick up another encounter in Wingull. It took until this point of the game to finally obtain one after all of the routes we ignored it on, basically. Wingull is a fantastic encounter. Pelipper has great typing, decent move pool, decent stats, and it just so happens to be the worst encounter on this route that I have not picked up yet. After training a couple new members up, I'm ready to move onto Mount Pyre to pick up another encounter on the summit in Chimecho. Another worst encounter that happens to be the rare one. Chimecho has fairly poor base stats overall, but it does get the most out of each one it uses though, so I don't think it's too bad. Psychic types are a bit on the weaker side though in this generation. And after dealing with the shenanigans on the summit, I head over to the Magma hideout to deal with Maxie again. I do get another encounter here as well in Graveler. The Geodude line is really good up to and including the 6th gym. And then they fall off a cliff, so great timing I guess. Luckily it doesn't matter because Graveler decides to fucking explode in my face anyway, which is something I forgot that it can do. That was really close. Now to deal with Mr. Maxie again. While this fight is definitely a bit more scary than the one on Mount Chimney, I didn't have much of an issue. Subtile easily takes out Mightyena, combination of Wigglytuff and Electrode take out Crobat, which is honestly his biggest threat in my experience. Camerupt comes out last, and with a free switch in on Earthquake, my Pelipper easily disposes of him as well. Maxie's down, now I gotta quickly deal with the other clowns. And honestly, there's not much here to see either, so I'm just gonna skip over that whole sequence. There's just a whole lot of nothing for the most part at this point in the game. I explore all the water routes, pick up some items, and just grind up for Tate and Liza. There was another encounter I could grab at this point if I wanted to, but I'm not really planning on using it anyway, especially not for Tate and Liza, so that can wait. After some time later, I'm ready to take on the 7th gym. Let's take a look at the team. I'm leading this fight off with Cacturne and Pelipper. Between the two of them, a Needle Arm Surf combo should basically decimate this entire team. Because we pumped some EVs into both, the Psychic Twins shouldn't be able to put up much of a fight. Cacturne and Pelipper are also holding Persim Berries because Xatu likes to use Confuse Ray a lot. There's really not much else to say about the remaining team members. Both Sceptile and Wigglytuff are fantastic backups that match up well against everything that Tate and Liza have. Electrode's nice for Xatu if I absolutely need him for for some reason, and Swalot is just gonna chill with me on the sidelines. And without further ado, here's how the fight went. I lead with Cacturne and Pelipper as planned. I wasn't expecting to be slower than Claydol, so I was a bit surprised by that, but at least Earthquake doesn't really deal a whole lot of damage to Cacturne. After my Surf Needle Arm combo goes off, Claydol is down, and I was also surprised that Xatu went with Calm Mind right off the bat instead of Confuse Ray. So on the following turn, I go for Leech Seed instead of Needle Arm, just to be on the safe side. Lunatone really isn't much of a threat anyway, honestly, so I'm not too worried about it. Xatu finally goes for that Confuse Ray, which is great, basically a free turn, and Lunatone goes for Calm Mind. The plan now is to go back to my combo, but I did run into a very close call with my Pelipper. Xatu's Psychic deals way more damage than I thought it would, even with a +1 from Calm Mind, and all Lunatone had to do was throw out a Psychic of his own and Pelipper would have been super done for. Luckily, it doesn't, and it just goes for Hypnosis instead. Even more surprisingly, my Surf crits Xatu and actually brings it down without needing Leech Seed. By the time Solrock comes out, Lunatone is already dead and this is basically over. I switch out both of my Pokemon for some fresh legs just to be on the safe side. Solrock starts whipping up a Solar Beam, and I know it's targeting Electrode because Pelipper was originally in his place. So I switch into Sceptile to tank the hit, and after a single Leaf Blade, Solrock is down and the 7th badge is ours. I honestly can't believe I had so many doubts in the encounters that I had received in this run. Let's hope I can keep this up for Juan in the Pokemon League. Next up, we got a lot of story stuff to rip through again, and as usual, I will not bore you with all the nitty-gritty details. I take on Team Magma again at the space station. Maxie's not really all that tough here. The double battle definitely makes it a lot easier to navigate. And then I take on Team Aqua and Archie. Again, another fight that did not give me any problems whatsoever. And then all the team leaders' fuck-ups take effect and the world is ending. Pay a quick visit to the Cave of Origin, and then grab Big Daddy Ray Ray and relive the cutscene for a millionth time. While I'm at Sky Pillar, I do get another encounter. The worst encounter at the Sky Pillar will have to be Sableye. Bad stats, but has an amazing defensive typing. It gets pretty decent support with Fake Out, Confuse Ray, and Detect. Could be a Toxic Staller if I want it to be, but probably won't bother to level it up, honestly. The team that I have currently is going to be as good as it gets for the most part. And that's it. Only thing left to do is to grind up for Juan. The plan at the moment is to use the exact same team I used for Tate and Liza, as pretty much all of these Pokemon match up nicely against Juan. I'll definitely want to strategize a little bit more for Juan though. That Kingdra is no joke. All grinded up and ready for the fight. You know what? I'm using the same team, most of the same moves. Let's just get right into this one. I lead with Sceptile to swiftly take out Love Disc with a Leaf Blade. Celio comes out next, and so I switch into Electrode first to set up a light screen. This ended up being immensely useful for me in this fight. And surprisingly, only one Thunderbolt later and Celio is down. I definitely thought it would take at least 2, but hey, I'm not complaining. His Whiscash comes out next, so I switch into Cacturne. Whiscash goes down to a Needle Arm, and now his Ace finally comes out. Kingdra goes for Double Team, and I go for Leech Seed, and it hits. This is huge and will make the fight a lot easier. However, here's where I make a huge mistake. I decided to go for Ingrain and see if I could last against Kingdra one-on-one. However, there were several factors to this that I did not account for, and I ended up losing Cacturne as a result. First of all, my HP was just barely high enough not to proc my Citrus Berry, which is really bad. But more importantly, I completely forgot that Light Screen had already dropped off, and therefore Ice Beam was going to hit for much, much harder now. That was a really dumb play, especially considering I had so many options to switch into to take some hits while Kingdra continued to lose health from Leech Seed. Kingdra eventually goes down to my Electrode with the help of a Leech Seed Light Screen combo. It takes a little while with Kingdra using Rest a few times, but eventually everything else worked out. Crawdaunt is last, and I bet my Sceptile felt quite offended when I sent him into battle against this pitiful creature. One Leaf Blade later, and we put this thing out of its misery. And with that, our gym challenge is finally over, and the badge is now ours. It sucks that I lost Cacturne there. I was actually starting to enjoy him quite a lot, actually. It also sucks that he won't be an option for the Elite Four either, which is a whole nother ordeal I'm going to have to start thinking about very soon. But before that happens, there's a couple of things I need to take care of. First things first, I actually forgot to grab my encounter from the Shoal Cave just north of Moss Deep City. My encounter here for the first time ever in any of my Nuzlockes will be Snorunt. This one hurts a lot for me personally because Feel is the other encounter in this place, and it's normally guaranteed and definitely a very good pickup. Walrein is one of my favorite Pokemon from this generation, and he absolutely absolutely demolishes the league, especially Drake. But Glalie, not so much. It's not the worst, it just doesn't do anything great. The good thing about coming to this cave though is getting the Never Melt Ice, which I might need to deal with Drake, and the Focus Band, which also might come in handy for the league challenge as well. The next thing I quickly take care of is gathering a few items up now that I can use Waterfall. Most importantly, including the TM for Dragon Claw, which will definitely come in handy for the Pokemon League. But I stopped to pick up some rare candies as well along the way. And now, time to trek through Victory Road. The next challenge in front of me, Wally. I lead with Wigglytuff because I know the extra special attack EVs, as well as the Never Melt Ice for good measure, is going to bring this Altaria down with a single Ice Beam. Delcatty is up next, so I switch into Swalot to bring it down with Toxic. I do get paralyzed during the fight, but I don't take too much damage. I thought Delcatty would go down with a final Poison Tick, but Wally decides to use a full restore, so I switch an Electrode to finish the job. I set up Light Screen before I take Delcatty out so that I can have a nice setup for the next Pokemon. With Magneton in, I switch into my camera up to take him out. Surprisingly, it only took a single Magnitude to bring it down. I just assumed with Magneton's great defense stat that it would have been able to hold on. And now for Wally's ace, Gardevoir. The most terrifying Pokemon on this team for sure. I switch back into Electrode first to get off another Light Screen. I then go back into Swalot to see if I can land another Toxic, and it hits. Now it's just about trying to get some extra damage in with my other Pokemon. I switch into Sceptile to try to take some shots, and I do bring Gardevoir down pretty low, but I'm not able to connect with the killing blow, and Wally uses another full restore. So I switch back into Electrode to put another Light Screen up, and then back into Sceptile again to try to bring Gardevoir down with Aerial Ace, but he won't get the chance. Gardevoir crits with Psychic and Sceptile goes down. I did not think a crit would have killed us there, but that just goes to show you how crazy scary this Gardevoir truly is. Wally's not an easy fight for this exact reason. That really sucks. But now I gotta focus and make sure my run isn't flat out over here. I switch into Wigglytuff to replace Sceptile and I start going for Thunderbolts. Luckily, despite all the double teams that Gardevoir used, both of my moves actually land and Wally's ace finally goes down. Roselia comes out last, and I just keep Wigglytuff in to kill it with fire. Our last major challenge has been completed, but not without a massive loss. I literally just taught Sceptile Dragon Claw as well. Not having him in general for the Pokemon League is going to be really rough. Well, I've got a lot to think about now. I need to design the team and do a whole lot of grinding to get everyone trained up to be the best they can possibly be. In case you were wondering exactly where we are at this point with our Pokemon, this is what's left of the party. These are our fallen comrades. I'm glad we haven't lost much overall, but losing Cacturne and Sceptile for just silly reasons hurts a lot. And finally, these are basically our remaining options for the Pokemon League. I will receive a Mawile as my encounter for Victory Road as well, so we'll see what it can bring to the team. Alright, I've got some serious grinding and strategizing to do. I'll see you guys in a bit. After quite a lot of training later, and we are finally here. One last quick overview of the team before I head in to take on the final challenge. Good old Belly Drum Linoon starts off the squad. I tried playing around with some ideas outside of just setting up, but honestly, with the options I had at my disposal, it was going to be too difficult. Plus, I really do enjoy showcasing what underrated Pokemon are truly capable of. While it could be possible to find a way to use Linoon on every single fight, I do want to try and get some of the other guys involved and showcase what they can do as well, many of which I have never used in any playthrough of Ruby and Sapphire or Emerald. Up next is Girafarig, and the same themes continue, but this time with a Calm Mind Baton Pass combo. Girafarig actually hits super hard by itself, but if I need to switch into something else, Baton Pass will be very helpful. Azumarill is set up with a Defense Curl rollout combo to try to do some snowballing potentially, but honestly, it just matches up so well against the entire league defensively. This thing is bulky as hell, and I imagine I'll be using Azumarill to Toxic Stall quite a bit if I need to. Both Pelipper and Electrode are essentially here to be the beneficiaries of Girafarig's Baton Pass. Pelipper is already super tanky, and Calm Mind setup is just going to take it to the next level. Electrode will benefit from the special attack boost greatly, and the fact that it's faster than anything else in the entire Pokemon League is a big plus. And of course, you know my team's got to be rounded out with this glorious shiny Swalot. Swalot is just a nice Pokemon to switch into if things get a little too hairy. Perfect for pivoting or just taking out some of the more annoying Pokemon to deal with. And it's shiny. Did I mention that it's shiny? I think I did. Anyway, will this be the most challenging part of the entire run? I don't know, but I'm super excited to get started. First up, Sydney. Not gonna lie, there isn't really a whole lot to see on this fight, or against Phoebe for that matter. I did, however, make a mistake in my preparation for this fight that could have potentially cost me. I should have given Linoon the white herb that I had in my inventory, just in case Mightyena used Sand Attack, which it of course did, and the accuracy drop really could have been bad. Luckily, it didn't matter, and Linoon is able to plow through the rest of Sydney's Pokemon with relative ease. I wasn't too worried though, as Sydney, in my opinion, is one of the weaker boss fights in the game in general. Next up is Phoebe, and she goes down even easier than Sydney. Literally the only attacking move her first Dusclops has is Shadow Punch, which can't hit Linoon. Other than that, the only thing that gets in the way is Confuse Ray, which I had Linoon hold a Person Berry for just in case. None of that actually mattered in the end, and after several Shadow Balls, Phoebe is completely and utterly decimated. Good old Belly Drum Linoon. Time for Glacia, and I did not go with Linoon for this route. Nope, it's time to let Girafarig shine. Although the idea is pretty much the same. Set up with Calm Minds and then rip through the entire team with a special attacker. What surprised me was how resilient Girafarig was defensively. I for sure thought that I would have to Baton Pass into Electrode to finish the fight, but nope, Girafarig destroyed everything. Girafarig is honestly pretty sick. It's fast, it hits hard, and it's surprisingly durable, especially on the physical defensive side, which is not usually the case with most Psychic types. I mean, geez, I've only used 2 Pokemon so far and I'm just cruising. Moving on to Drake, and I did run into a bit more problems with this one. I lead with Girafarig to try to set up with Calm Minds again. This Shelgon is a bit more scary than the Celio I dealt with earlier, but it does like to go for Protect a lot. And this is really the biggest flaw in Drake's fight. Drake has an incredibly scary team, but his AI is very strange to say the least. This Shelgon protects a bunch when it doesn't need to, and we'll see other examples like this later in the fight. I Baton Pass into Pelipper to attempt to Ice Beam his entire team down. The Salamence is the scariest part here, is I need to take a big risk and avoid Rock Slide crit or flinch, which thank God I do. Altaria and Kingdra would be the next to come out, and they both seem to always go for Dragon Dance first no matter what, which leaves the door open for us to Ice Beam and take them down. Well, at least Altaria, that is. Kingdra happened to be a bit more stubborn. Ice Beam just barely doesn't kill, and Drake starts to use his full restores. I'm not going to be able to take this Kingdra down with 2 hits from Pelipper because he's not fast enough, so I switch into Azumarill next in anticipation of another full restore. I go for Toxic as Kingdra starts setting up Dragon Dance. Azumarill is probably tanky enough to take this Kingdra on one-on-one for a bit, so I leave him in for the time being. After some back and forth, Kingdra actually finally goes down to Azumarill, and now it's time for Drake's final Pokemon, Flygon. Now, generally speaking, this Flygon is not usually an issue as long as you can Ice Beam it, or use Blizzard or something. Unfortunately for me, both of my Ice Beam users are far too weak at the moment to take him on, and I'm in a lot of trouble all of a sudden. I switch into Linoon first to try to get some damage off, but it doesn't really go very well. Slash doesn't deal a whole lot, and Earthquake does. I could have easily lost him there. I switch into Pelipper because I'm expecting another Earthquake, and now I have to figure something out. I decided to go for the Toxic strats, so I went to Swalot to take a Dragon Breath and the following Earthquake. Looking back on this moment, hitting that Toxic was probably required if I was going to make it out of this fight alive, honestly. So I'm really glad that it landed. Anticipating another Earthquake, I switch back into Pelipper, and this will essentially be the theme for the rest of the fight. I'm trying to stall until Flygon succumbs to Toxic. Unfortunately, I have a very important decision to make here with my Pelipper on the final turn of Flygon's poison. I had completely forgotten if Drake had used all of his full restores or not, so I went for Ice Beam just in case he did go for one. Unfortunately, he doesn't go for the full restore, and Pelipper goes down. I should have been paying more attention to the full restores. I absolutely had to take this risk here, because if Drake did heal Flygon back to full, I was done for. Pelipper wasn't going to be an absolutely essential piece for Wallace, but being a team member down is never a good thing, especially in a challenge like this. And that brings us to the champion, Wallace, the only thing left standing in my way. I start off the fight with a very risky calculation on his Wailord. In my experience from past Nuzlockes, this Wailord loves going for Water Spout first and then Rain Dance, as long as it doesn't see a kill on the next turn. So I decide to go for something crazy and go for a Belly Drum setup. Linoone wasn't going to be much of a factor on any of Wallace's other Pokemon anyway, so why not go for it? I set up Sunny Day first because I know that Water Spout was coming. And now I hit Belly Drum, and he goes for the Rain Dance. Thank God. The damage from Slash is just barely not enough to take him out, but this is actually super good for me, because now Wallace will want to use his full restores on Wailord instead of something else. Since we're faster, he doesn't have a chance to respond, and with a crit on the next Slash, Wailord goes down. Tentacruel comes out, and I actually wasn't sure if Linoone would be faster, but I wasn't going to bother switching into something else. Luckily though, he is faster, and we get another kill. Man, it feels good to get carried by an early normal type. Ludicolo was up next, and Slash is able to take him down as well, which is absolutely huge because that Ludicolo is one of the hardest Pokemon to deal with on this fight. Unfortunately, Whiscash comes out next, and this is where Linoone's journey ends. Slash is barely not able to take this bulky Mudfish out, and Linoone goes down. He will be missed, especially since he was with the team from the very beginning, but man did he have a huge impact on our final push. I send in Azumarill and go for Toxic, as I'm guessing Wallace will use a full restore at this point. He does, and now I just have to stall. With Whiscash's lackluster attacking stats and Azumarill's bulkiness, I go for the Defense Curl spam. I then make probably the dumbest decision I've made in this entire Pokemon League run and go for rollouts. Even though not very effective, I got it in my head that it would deal more damage than it actually did. It's not enough damage to take Whiscash out before Wallace can use another full restore, and now I'm stuck in rollout until I miss. Luckily though, the RNG gods blessed me, and I end up getting all 5 rollouts off against Whiscash, with the last one taking him out. Never punished. Wallace sends out Gyarados next, and I go for another Toxic, because I still have all of those defense curls up, so I'm not too worried about getting knocked out here. A crit would have ended me, of course, but I felt like I had to take the risk to get through this. Since we are nearing the end of the fight, I start going for rollouts to get as much damage in as I can before Azumarill goes down. I won't need Azumarill for the rest of the fight, so strategically sacrificing him here I thought would be the best play. But Azumarill's rollout actually crits and takes out the Gyarados. Wow. Wallace's ace Milotic comes out last, and because Azumarill is still stuck in rollout, he finally goes down, but not without dealing some serious damage in this fight. I send out Girafarig on the clean switch and immediately go for some Calm Minds. Milotic's only 2 attacking moves are both special, so I'm hoping that I can get at least a few off before baton passing. After the second one, it looks like my HP is a little bit too low to continue with the setup, so I go for a single Thunderbolt, praying that I will not be crit again. It goes off and it deals a ton of damage, and I get the paralysis as well. The best part about this is the Citrus Berry getting popped on Milotic, so it's now out of the range where Wallace would want to use a full restore. I quickly use Baton Pass into Electrode, and after tanking a Surf, I use one last Thunderbolt to finish the job. It may not have come without some sacrifices and a little bit of luck. Okay, maybe a lot of luck, but man, finishing this run feels good. And I have never had a Hall of Fame team that looked quite like this before. And with that, this video is now over. This was something a bit different from my typical content, so I hope you guys enjoyed this run as much as I did. And let me know if you would like to see more of these types of videos in the future. In the meantime, please like the video and subscribe for more content like this. That's it from me. I'll see you next time.